My concern for the shelter is that it not be a huge conglomeration, 1,000-bed shelter. A smaller shelter is definitely what I'm looking at. I also believe they need to be away from forested areas. As if we do sanctioned camp, that's also what I believe. Those areas are just ripe for forest fires, and it's pretty hard to keep. And Roger, he's got lived experience. People who are near those forested areas are also not protected from the wildlife, as we saw at Centennial Park last year. Something I did not know before I got on the assembly is that HUD will kick in quite a bit of funding for housing, but they do not pay for shelters. And so the housing first, besides it being the most successful next step for people experiencing homelessness, there's just study after study that shows that people who are just living in a shelter don't launch themselves into housing. They fall back into the same patterns. And those that start out with housing have a much greater success rate. So we are for that, but it takes time. It's not going to be a quick fix. And I personally believe, and I'm not speaking for anyone else on the assembly, that we're always going to need a shelter. There are always going to be people who are in crisis that need to go somewhere so that they're not on the street. And so the shelter is an important first step, and a step that some people are going to need. The Clean Slate is a means of starting completely over from the Tudor-Elmore sprung structure, total focus, and instead look at where else, what the shelter should look like, what kinds of services should be available, where it should be, which I know every single one of us is probably here with a not in my backyard, and I completely understand that. I know you're, can I?
Yeah, why do we keep going away from the Tudor-Elmore site? Why is that not? You keep saying that we need something very soon, by the end of the summer, and that is projected to be completed by end of summer and provide X amount of housing. So why does that keep getting brought off the table?
My personal feeling is, I don't know if you've tracked the money on that. The original estimates of the sprung shelter were at least half of what they are at this point. Is that right, Felix? I mean, the sprung structure price ballooned, and the problem now is we are in a lawsuit with the contractor that did the work, and they are owed $12.5 million. We are being told $7 million will finish that sprung structure. So now we're at $19.5 million plus whatever's been put in. And I asked the question of the mayor, is the $7 million the hard stop? This is what you need, the interior amenities, what you need inside. And that answer was, I never got an answer to that. So our fear, my fear, is that the money that we're seeing is like, this is it for that, is just going to continue to balloon, and it's not a permanent solution. It's a tent. It's not going to last like a building structure. And so I feel like it was a bad investment to start with, and it's going to be a money pit. And I'm much for brick and mortar is what I'm looking at, an abandoned building that could be easily turned into shelter is my first choice rather than going with that. And the other problem with it is the estimates, now speaking for myself, the estimates on running that shelter at Tudor and Elmore are higher than what the Sullivan was running. And that just doesn't add up to me, that you've got this, one of the reasons we're not in that big giant Sullivan arena is to save expenses, and if the expenses are going to be higher, which his estimate was like $6.2 million a year,
get to the estimates for all the other proposed.
Actually, folks, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks. All right. So, if we can go ahead and turn the live stream on. Perfect, live stream is on. So I apologize for folks, we're having some technical difficulties this morning, so we don't have the slides to present. The slides are on our website, but I'm gonna go ahead and do my best to walk us through the slides today. So, thank you all for coming today, and welcome to this next phase of a discussion which began in March when the Assembly approved the creation of the Clean Slate strategy, which is a process for us as a community to stand up a new permanent year-round low-barrier shelter by November 1. This is the first of 3 town halls where we're going to be talking about shelter basics and criteria. For those interested, these slides are on the Assembly website under the Homelessness Focus page. For folks who are following us online, I'll repeat this later, but just to give you a little bit of a heads up, there is no easy or efficient way for you to participate in this town hall, but if you have comments that you'd like to be put into the record for this town hall, the best way to do that is to email me at felix.rivera@anchorageak.gov. Again, that is felix.rivera@anchorageak.gov. All right, so our agenda today, we have a few different presentations to give, and then we'll get to public participation and Q&A. And definitely intend to save a majority of our time for that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the lay of the land, some shelter best practices, shelter licensing, some examples of well-run shelter, and then review of past shelter criteria that have been considered. So with regard to the lay of the land, we're going to do it in 3 different phases, starting with pre-COVID, then moving on to during COVID, and then post-COVID. This is going to be an extensive or exhaustive list and won't really be a homelessness 101. I'm going to be focusing on a few different areas, including the municipality's role in homelessness, some funding decisions that the municipality has made over the years. I'm going to use the Brother Francis Shelter as an example, as historically the Brother Francis Shelter has been the municipality's only low barrier shelter. And then I'm going to be using the January point in time count as a